Cool. Welcome, everybody. My name is Erin Sherrill. I'm the Director for Career Development. I'm super happy that you've all joined us for our Engineering Alumni panel. I'm very happy to introduce our student moderator, Joi Butler. Joi is a sophomore. She is a physics major and a part of the dual degree program with a mechanical engineering focus. And she's got a lot of great questions for our panelists. And just so you know, please utilize the Q&A function and the chat to ask your questions. I will help monitor those, and Joi will have lots of questions for the panelists. So Joi, why don't you take it away?
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our panel. On behalf of the Office of Alumni Relations, Career Development, and STAT, I am excited to close out our awesome panel series. As Ms. Erin mentioned, I am Joi Butler, and I'm very thrilled to be moderating tonight. So before we get started with some questions, I'd like to ask each panelist to introduce themselves, your name, class year, and what you studied at OU, and where you work now, and what do you do for the organization?
My name is Ben Robertson. I graduated in 2013 with my degree in physics, and now I work for a structural engineering firm just down the road in Chambly called Shear Structural. I work as a structural project engineer.
Hi, I'm Laura Rafter. I graduated from Oglethorpe in 2003 with the 3-2 program. I got my mechanical engineering degree from Georgia Tech. And I now work for Newcomb and Boyd Engineering there in Atlanta. I work remotely though, so I don't live actually in Atlanta.
Hi, I'm Adelaide. I graduated from Oglethorpe in 2007. I studied physics while I was at Oglethorpe, and then I went back to school a couple years later and got a master's in electrical engineering. I work for a company called Schweitzer Engineering Laboratories up in Alpharetta. But these days I do mostly project management. So I used to do technical electrical engineering work, but now it's mostly managing projects with other electrical engineers working on them.
I graduated from Oglethorpe in 2015. I was in the dual degree program. I wound up transferring to Auburn after, and I graduated in mechanical engineering there. And as of right now, I work for the Missile Defense Agency in Huntsville, Alabama.
I'm John Perry, graduated at Oglethorpe in 1991, and with a degree in math. And I was in the dual degree program, but I didn't quite have good enough grades to get a scholarship at Georgia Tech or Auburn or Florida. So I ended up at Tennessee Tech, which was a great decision, and graduated in '94 with a degree in civil engineering. And I currently work at Gresham Smith in Nashville, but I've kind of traveled all around with them. Currently, I serve as a construction engineering and inspection group leader, predominantly working for departments of transportation, mainly in Tennessee, but we also have offices in Georgia and Alabama, Mississippi, and in other states along the eastern seaboard. And I've been with the firm doing a wide variety of different assignments. July will be 25 years.
Wow, this is all so amazing. We have some experts, like some experts on the line. So I'm so glad that we're able to have this. So let's dig into some questions. Any of our panelists are welcome, but don't feel obligated to answer every question. But input is very important. So my first question for you is a reflection at your time at OU. What is one dynamic, a club, an organization, or a course from your Oglethorpe experience that has benefited you in your career? And we can start with Miss Ann, and then alphabetical after that. By last name, my bad.
Sure. So one thing that I think really helped set me apart as an engineer was just the strong liberal arts background that I got at Oglethorpe. having the critical thinking skills that you develop in a liberal arts program, as well as the writing and the communication skills, I think are really, really important when you're job searching, when you're communicating with clients and other colleagues. So just kind of that core curriculum, the focus on writing and synthesizing information across different fields is something a little bit different than I got in my technical courses, but I think it's something that's really set me apart as an engineer.
And I don't know who's next, but I'll go. I agree very much with the liberal arts curriculum, especially the writing and communication. But I'll tell you, I was on the cross country team for 4 years and really enjoyed the teamwork lessons of that, because in engineering you really seldom work alone. You're almost always having to collaborate as a civil engineer across disciplines, working with architects, all of the structural, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and you're working with agencies. The lion's share of my career is really, I look at it as really being a public servant, because you're working for municipalities, for airports, for school districts. It's been really fulfilling.
Miss Laura, you're next.
I agree. The liberal arts thing has been huge. For me, it's all the writing. I was terrible. I was a math and science person. So for me, being forced to do that liberal arts stuff and the writing, I do so much better in my career because I sound more intelligent, because I know how to write things up. And when I communicate, because I work in the same type of industry as John here. And so I work with architects and people that are not necessarily, and owners and clients that are not necessarily on the same math science stuff. And they want things in their types of terms. And that's really made a big difference. One of the other things I wanted to kind of mention for me was the small class size stuff. For me, I was a shy kid in high school. I did not want to be overly involved. I didn't have a problem answering a question in class if it was a black and white question, if it's 2 + 2. But if it's be creative and come up with ideas, I tended to shy away from that stuff. Well, I had a 2-person class with Dr. Robertson of all people, and it finally gave me kind of some confidence in myself. It was me and David, and we had a lab with Dr. Robertson, and we did the course stuff, but then Dr. Robertson kind of let us come up with our own ideas for our own experiments and our own things to do. And that broke me out of that box, that if I had gone straight to Georgia Tech and been in that class with 200 people, instead of having that small class size stuff at Oglethorpe first, I don't know that I would have ever broke out of that and would have gained that confidence in myself. So that to me was just a huge benefit of my Oglethorpe education.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback off of that. That definitely helped just develop a better understanding of whatever course we were in. I mean, I think my maximum course size was probably 5, maybe in my major courses. So just having that, almost one-on-one type of course with Dr. Robertson really helped to strengthen my technical abilities. I also took one of my favorite classes I took, put together an independent study course with Dr. Robertson, and it basically mimicked a mechanics of materials course that you would find at a Georgia Tech or Auburn or something like that, like an engineering school. And that was kind of my first real engineering type class that I had taken. And it kind of pushed me all in to realize I knew I wanted to do structural engineering. I was kind of teetering between a couple different kinds at that point. I knew I really liked structures, but that class kind of steered me 100% into structural engineering.
So I guess for myself, I learned a lot just from being on a sports team. I played baseball at Oglethorpe, and when you're on a sports team, you always got to work together, and it's no different when you're in a work environment. But also, you have to learn to be disciplined. You have to learn to go through adversity and all those other type of things. And I'm sure all these people on this panel can tell you most of the time when you're taking a class, you don't know it right off the hand, like the back of your hand. So it's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of effort. It's going to take a lot of hours studying, many hours. But, once you have the discipline to keep going, because you're going to need it. That's kind of one of the lessons that I've learned.
Awesome. I hope everyone's taking notes. I know I am. So, as a follow-up question, what is something that you wish you knew or had been privy to knowing prior to embarking on your professional pursuits? I apologize, I was muted. We can start in any order and just follow up back after each other and keep it moving.
I'll go ahead and jump in. For me, I didn't feel like early on in college and most of college that I really got a lot of information on all the different types of engineering and the careers available. The industry that I ultimately landed in, I landed in sort of by accident. It was a process of me sending out applications and trying to get an internship when I was in college, and just looking at different companies in the Atlanta area, and the one that hired me, well, it turned out to be a great fit for me, and it's where I've stayed for an industry. But when I was in college, I didn't feel like there was a lot of information being provided, and being a mechanical engineer, there's quite a few different routes you can go. And I think that's something when you're in school, you really kind of need to explore and look at, so that you have an idea of where you want to go when you graduate and what things you want to work on.
If I can kind of piggyback off of that, when you're in school, you have no idea what you want to do. I mean, you just don't. So everyone that's listening, like, just go try things, go explore, go do research, whatever it may be. So that way you can get a taste of, oh, I like structural stuff. Maybe I should be a structural engineer, or maybe I'm really good with my hands and I like things that move. So maybe I should be a mechanical engineer, or I really like planes, so I should be aerospace. Whatever it may be, do some research, ask some questions, ask people, so that way you can kind of get a better idea of what avenue that you want to go to. So.
Yeah, if I can just echo kind of what Laura and Vernon have said, try to talk to as many people in the field as you can. When I was in school, I didn't really understand what I would be doing on a day-to-day basis. And so if you can kind of try to talk to people, ask those questions, that will help you figure out which direction you want to go in. And that will help you kind of also make connections in your field and be able to speak more intelligently when you go to interviews. So get as much information as you can as early as you can.
Yeah, and I guess I'll continue piggybacking off of that. One of the things I wish I had done is taken an internship. I didn't taken any internships in undergrad or grad school. So when I got my first job, that was the very first time that I was actually doing an engineering work and was in a work environment. And it's very, very different than what you experience when you're in school. Obviously, you learn a lot in school and you learn the technical side of things, but you don't really understand the day-to-day. This is what I'm going to be doing. These are the people I'm going to be dealing with. This is how I deal with them. So if you have the opportunity, I would definitely recommend trying to find an internship, or like Anne was saying, network. If you can shadow somebody, just to have an understanding of kind of what you might be doing on a day-to-day basis. It's very beneficial.
I think that I really got a lot of value in student organizations, especially the American Society of Civil Engineers, that are very active in engineering colleges. And they have annual conferences. You might have heard of the concrete canoe competition, where you literally build a concrete canoe and race it against the other colleges in your region, and then I think they go on to national, although we never did. But those had say at Cookeville, once a year, the Nashville branch of ASCE, they would get on a bus and come to we put on a banquet for them there at the university, and there you can meet guys that have been doing it, and you can network there. You can I got interns, summer internships, every summer. But I would just encourage involvement at the student level with some of the organizations, and all of the disciplines, I believe, have national organizations and then local affiliates.
This is all great information. This is great. Like I said, I hope y'all taking notes, because this is a lot to absorb. So on to the next question. How did you decide what type of engineering that you wanted to pursue, and whether that may be like an event that happened, or was it maybe somebody that inspired you, or anything like that? That also includes into that question. And we can start with Mr. Ben and then follow with Miss Anne, and following after that. That works?
Yeah, definitely. So growing up, I always loved playing with Connects and Legos and trying to build things, put things together, see how things worked. So I always knew I wanted to do some sort of engineering from a pretty young age. And then, as I got older and understood what some of the people in my family did for a living, I realized, my grandfather, my uncle, and one of my aunts were structural engineers. And just the thought that I could basically do what I was doing with Legos, Connects, and put buildings together as my real job sounded pretty good. So I like I said, I knew from fairly young age that would be a possibility. I was also interested in biomedical engineering, but after going through some biology classes and realizing that wasn't really my strength, I decided to put that to the side and continue with structural.
Kind of like Ben, well, I was blessed. My dad was a civil engineer, and when I was 6, 7, 8, he was on. He worked for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and he was assigned to an emergency operation, they called it, and it was building a levee along the Ohio River outside of Louisville, Kentucky. And he would be up there during the week and home most weekends. But in the summer, when I was out of school, I'd go and, and spend a week or two and just, I remember the smell of the dirt and the big machines. And he would put me with his favorite inspector, and they would babysit me. And and after that, I don't really think I had a choice.
For myself, I kind of knew I wanted to go into engineering, and then it ended up kind of taking a winding path to get there. I stayed and got a physics degree from Oglethorpe because I just didn't want to leave, but eventually made my way back to get a master's in engineering. And when I was trying to figure out what field I wanted to go into, I was really excited about renewable energy at the time. So that was kind of what made me decide to go the electrical route. Although if you asked Dr. Rulison, he probably would have been surprised, because I think the electricity side of things is probably my weakest point when I was at Oglethorpe. But luckily I've done okay. But yeah, so I was excited about renewable energy, and I ended up in the power field. I don't work exclusively with renewable energy, but was able to kind of stay there in the power discipline. So that was kind of how I made my choice, and I don't regret it. So luckily I don't regret it.
For me, I went into mechanical engineering, and for me, I started to head in that direction because I liked mechanical things as a kid. I liked working on the car with my dad. I liked trying to figure out how things worked. So it was sort of a natural path to head in that direction. But as far as where and what I did with mechanical engineering, that for me fell into place when I got that internship in college. I, in high school, thought briefly, I want to be an architect. I like buildings. And then I said, whoa, Laura, you are not artsy, designing the exterior of a building, what it looks like, and that kind of stuff. That's not for you. The stuff I like clearly is not what's popular. So, I backed off of the architecture option because I was just like, that's not me. Well, when I got that internship, I found an engineering type of job that I could work with buildings, and I could work with systems in buildings. Something I didn't think about as a kid is, there's all those different systems that make that building work, whether it's the structure itself, that there's an engineering behind, the civil and the site work and everything, the electrical systems in the building, the plumbing, or what I do, which is HVAC. So that when I discovered that, I realized, hey, I can work in that industry and be an engineer, something that I'm good at, versus the artsier side of architecture. And I just discovered that was really what was for me. So it worked out well.
So I'll be honest, I had no idea. I went to Auburn and I said, I have no idea. And then someone told me, well, if you do mechanical, you can kind of just branch out and kind of do whatever you need to do after. So they said mechanical was kind of like the jack of all trades, and then you can go into anything else after that. So to be honest, I said, I have no clue. And I did mechanical and said, all right, I'll figure it out after that. So just being honest.
This is great. I like all the different stories to end up where you are, and that's I think very important for any student to know that just the course that you decide at the moment doesn't always mean that that's exactly where you're going to go, and you just find things on the way. So the next question, I heard someone mention a master's degree before. So the question is a master's degree a must-have as an engineer? And Vernon, we can start with you, and then work backwards.
Okay, I'll make mine short. The answer is no. I mean, you can do your job without it. If you get a master's, that's fine. It makes you more valuable to your company. So if you want to be more valuable, I mean, you do make more money, if we can be monetary for a second. But to be honest, it's not necessary. It's not a necessity. But if that's something that you like to do, so pretty much like when you get a master's degree, you kind of limit what you focus on. So in general, You know, you just have an engineering degree, you can do a lot of things, but once you get a master's and above, you start to hone in on what you like to do. So it's a long answer, but sorry.
I agree with Vernon. It is not a requirement. I would like to say yet, especially in civil engineering, the ASCE has been encouraging a master's degree for many years, and they say a bachelor's plus 30 is what they, 30 hours, which that's usually about a master's. They are, I feel like, pushing toward getting the licensure boards of states to require that. Right now, it's that an apprenticeship is required once you graduate with an engineering degree and pass the fundamentals of engineering exam. Then you work under the supervision of a licensed engineer for 4.5 years or so, and then sit for the principles and practice exam. When you're successful at that, then you're a professional engineer. So that, that's kind of a master's in itself. But I agree with Vernon that usually the masters are much more focused. I've had I've done a wide variety of different kinds of work just in civil engineering. From there's a whole lot of hydraulics and hydrology. There's traffic engineering. Even some structural, civil and structural are closely related, at least at Tennessee Tech. You didn't get out of there with a civil engineering degree without taking the structural steel, reinforced concrete classes. But a master's is not a requirement.
Yeah, and I'll agree with them both. It's definitely not a requirement. I did get my master's after I graduated from Oglethorpe, partly because, similar to Anne, I studied physics for 4 years. I didn't want to leave. So after graduating with a physics degree, it would have been probably pretty hard to get an engineering, at least a structural engineering job without having some sort of structure background. So I think it definitely, kind of like Vernon was saying, depending on what your focus is, it may make you a little bit more valuable in some regards, but it is definitely not a requirement. We have some wonderful engineers at the company I work for that don't have their masters, and they're much better engineers than I am. So.
I'll also agree that a master's is not necessary. If you have a very specific niche that you want to go into, it might benefit you for that specific job. But the industries I've worked in, it's not been a requirement, and it's not necessarily been very beneficial. There's some engineers at our firm right now that have master's degree. I also did about 3.5 years in the manufacturing industry at a manufacturing plant. And there was a couple guys with masters. And the truth is, when they came in entry level, they weren't put in a better position because they had an extra degree, and they really weren't, making bukus more money. So for me personally, I didn't see the benefit, but I think there are maybe some cases where certain industries and certain specific niches that may be beneficial, but generally, no, it's not necessary and not a big benefit.
One thing I forgot to mention is that I am aware of certain states that do give credit toward that apprentice time. If you hold a master's, then they'll cut a year off of the required, I call it time in rank, before you can sit for the professional exam.
I want to share a little bit, I guess maybe a little bit different perspective. The company I work for is kind of a niche company. And so when in my field, if you come out of school with an electrical engineering degree, you've probably only had one or two courses in power systems in particular. So like Vernon mentioned, the master's degree really helps you kind of focus. And so at my company, it's actually quite a benefit if you have a master's where you've focused on that particular field. So I think there are instances where having that master's degree might give you the kind of the background knowledge to step right into something that's a little bit more specific. But I definitely agree with the group that it is not a requirement to getting an engineering job, but it may just open different opportunities if it is something that you do pursue. But be careful, because it will kind of force you to specialize. So if you're not quite sure what you want to do, it's probably better to get some work experience first before you commit to that specialized degree.
This is great to know. I'm glad that that I asked that question, because I thought personally about getting a master's degree, of course, after. But after hearing this perspective, knowing that work experience kind of helps you better realize maybe this may or may not be something that you want to do. This is great to know. So following up, I guess after that, we often hear about like the networking, the internships. They're all vital to success during and after college. So what first steps can you recommend in marketing marketing ourselves as students and getting exposure to the workplace? We could start with Mr. Ben, and then maybe Miss Laura, and then go back and forth. That works.
Yeah, kind of what I touched on earlier. I think if you can get an internship as early as you can, that'll help for a few reasons. Obviously, one, to just understand what you might be doing on a day-to-day basis, but then that also may open doors down the road. You know, whoever you're participating in the internship with, they may hire you full-time once you graduate, or you may realize, you know what, this isn't the type of engineering I want to do. Let me focus, go a different direction. So like I said, I didn't do an internship, and I wish that I had in retrospect. And I would highly recommend just getting some type of work experience if you can, prior to kind of getting into the industry full force.
I definitely recommend doing internships. I did them. I started the summer after my sophomore year, and I found it a little bit tough at that time period, applying for internships as an Oglethorpe student in engineering. A lot of companies were like, what, you're not at Georgia Tech? Because the Atlanta area has a big pull for having an engineering school right there of student pools. It made it a little bit tougher, but my advice is be persistent. And even if a business is not advertising a job position, send them a resume. Be personable about it. Tell them what you like about that company, why you're interested, what you're planning on doing, and make sure that you explain that what your goals are and where you're going with your college degree and that kind of stuff. And that got my foot in the door. I actually worked for 3 different companies during college. Every summer I worked full-time for somebody, and I work part-time during school. I won't necessarily recommend you work that much, but summers, if you're not taking classes at Oglethorpe, it's a great opportunity to get some experience. And I totally support trying different companies. For me, the 3 companies I worked for were all in the same industry, because they were easy to get other ones, because they were like, hey, you got experience, so we know you know something. And it made a big difference. One of those companies I did a summer with is who I work for full time now, and I've been there for quite a few years. And it's a good company. It also kind of gave me the opportunity to feel that company out before I went full time. to know, is that company somewhere you really want to be? Like, you know, the work atmosphere, not just what the offer is on paper, which is basically money and benefits. You know what kind of people you're working with. You know, one of the companies I work for kind of got known as the sweatshop around town, and it in that industry. And I knew I didn't want to work full time there. So it's a great experience. One of the other things I would recommend is, if you know kind of where you're wanting to head in engineering, this goes a little bit back to what John mentioned. There are engineering societies in the area, not necessarily associated with Oglethorpe, but they're associated with Georgia Tech in some cases, and they're just in the area. For example, I do HVAC. Our organization is called ASHRAE. They have student memberships that are next to nothing. So if you think that's a direction you want to head in, there's, you know, Society of Mechanical Engineering, Society of Automotive Engineers. Look those groups up, go to some meetings, meet some people, talk to them about their career field, talk to them about what they do on a daily basis at their job, because that's the key, is what you think that career may be might not be what it really is until you kind of really talk to somebody one-on-one about it, or go do that internship and see. Because sometimes you think it's a lot more fun maybe than it is, or sometimes you think it's going to be horrifically boring. It turns out, wow, that's actually a lot different than I imagined. So I think those are good things during school to work with.
I guess everything everybody said is awesome. Definitely those internships. And one thing that helped me kind of figure out where to apply was just talking to my professors. They know people in the field, they know of different companies. So definitely talk to everybody in your sphere that has engineering connections to kind of learn a little bit more about what's out there.
Right. That's great. All right. And then, so this next question says, what's the most enjoyable part of your job? I ask because working in and with engineering can mean a lot of things. And I know we're all hoping to pinpoint to the niche that kind of best suits us and interests us. So knowing that, what is like the most enjoyable part of your job? We could start with Mr. John first and
Okay.
go back.
For me, it's really all about safety. I just feel like every day, in at least some small way, that we make the built environment a little bit better and a little bit safer for everybody to use. You know, whether it's drinking water or you know, taking a sharp vertical curve out of a narrow road, or, you know, there's just millions of examples. But that's really it for me. Just really the public service is for me just very, very fulfilling.
For me, similar to John, one of the nice parts for me is, with the industry I work in, we work on a variety of projects. So I've worked on projects that to me are kind of boring, like a high-rise hotel or an office building, but I've worked on other things like lab buildings and hospitals. And it's kind of nice to know that you have a part in creating a facility. Like for me, we did a project called genetic medicine at University of North Carolina, a huge 350,000 square foot building that they're using lab mice and all kinds of things. They might cure cancer or something there in that building one day that I helped to build. And for me, that's very rewarding, but it's also nice that every project's different. I work on a variety of types of buildings. I've done prisons, I've done hospitals, all kinds of things, boring strip malls occasionally, you know, and even if you're doing a hospital, an office building, each project within that same genre is still unique and different. So one OR is not identical to every other OR. So each one is different. Each project has different challenges that might be site specific, might be owner specific. And that really keeps the job for me from being boring. I'm not doing the same thing every day. Every project's different. And that's one of the reasons I like the industry that I'm in, is that's unique. I work with a different group of people every project. We don't have the same architects every project, the same contractors, the same owners. While we might do a lot of work for Northside Hospital, for example, we work for other people. So you get used to working with a variety of people, and that keeps things exciting and from being boring, because you're not stuck in that rut of the same thing every day. So that makes a big difference to me.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. We work on a variety of different projects across really all industries, higher ed. We do city municipalities, police stations, fire stations, work on hospitals. So just the like Laura was saying, even in your same field, having each project have its own challenges is really rewarding to try to solve that specific problem. I also, as a structural engineer, we work very closely with the architect. I know a lot of us in the industry do, but we kind of help bring the architect's idea to life, right? They say, this is how we want this space to look. This is how we want it to feel. This is, we want this huge glass wall over here. And it's fun to be able for them to come to us with, hey, this is what we want to do. And, just try to solve that problem for them and make a building look and feel like the architect wants, while knowing that it's safe to stand in.
So for me, I got into engineering because I liked the idea of problem solving. But one thing that I realized I really enjoyed was not just solving the technical problems, but also solving the logistical problems. And I think that's kind of how I got into the project management side of things. So one of my favorite parts of my job is being able to build a relationship with our clients and my team to help us solve those logistical problems, information sharing, scheduling sort of things. And so that's actually one of the things that I enjoy the most, which maybe is a bit different for the engineering group.
All right, Mr. Vernon, did you have any input that you wanted to add?
I was just gonna piggyback off and just say I like hanging out with my coworkers, which is a little bit different. When you're in the work life, you get to go out for lunch and have lunch and talk about life and that whole thing. So I think that's cool. And working for the Missile Defense Agency, there is a sense of self-worth. You're protecting the home front from any adversary missiles or anything like that, any vehicles that may come about, which is fulfilling at the end of the day. But really, the people that are on your team as an engineer, I like hanging out with them and making sure that everyone's fine in that. So that's it for me.
All right. So now we are going to ask some virtual questions from the crowd. So please use the chat button or the Q&A feature to submit questions to the panel. Please introduce yourself, provide your class year, and then what you're majoring in. And so with that, we already have one question in the Q&A. So this is from Dr. Robertson. He said, knowing what you know now, if anything, what would you do differently, or what would you emphasize more or less? And we can start with Miss Laura this time and go from there.
I would say for me, the thing that I think I did a little bit wrong, although I don't know that I'd really go back and change much anything, was I did work a little too much in school. Like I mentioned, I did the full times in the summer, but I worked part-time during school. So I left class, I went straight to my job. And then when I got done with job, I went straight to hit the books and do whatever assignments I had, and I went to bed. And I think I was a little too overly busy. And sometimes I think you need to take a step back. At the time, for me, it was a financial reason. You know, I had some money for school, but not a full take care of all the bills sort of situation. So I worked during school to make sure I could, you know, pay the rent, et cetera, and all those things. But if you have ways to not have yourself overextended and busy, I think it benefits. I had like one semester that I didn't work in school, but it was because like I took some crazy like 6 to 8 classes. I can't remember. It was something ridiculous. That was when I was at Georgia Tech. But I would say make sure that you're not overloading yourself. You've got time to step aside and think to yourself. And, you know, because really this is a time period, not just for you to become educated and to learn, but to start to lay out and plan your life. Now, certainly by no means are you going to plan everything out the way it's going to lay out, but you're going to pick a general direction for yourself. And you don't want your brain so overloaded that you can't really have some time to think and do those things. So that would kind of be my recommendation.
Yeah, I've touched on it several times throughout this panel, but yeah, I enjoyed my time at Oglethorpe very much, just from the courses I took, the organizations I was involved in, but I do wish, like I said earlier, that I had participated in some sort of internship just to start laying the groundwork again for what what was to come when I would start working in the industry. And again, just gain that experience, whether it's trying to figure out exactly what engineering you want to do, or like Laura was saying, if it's the people you want to work with or the organization you want to work with, because sure, we've all worked for companies that didn't have the best culture, and you might be making a lot of money or you might be working on cool projects, but if you are not working with people you enjoy working with, it can be a real drag. So again, I would highly stress working on finding an internship at some point throughout your time of work.
Yeah, I'll echo what Ben said. I wish I had done internships earlier. I spent some time when I was working on my engineering degree doing research, because when I was studying physics, that was kind of the thing to do, was you got research experience. But once I made that transition into engineering, I wish I had known to focus more on the internship side of things than the research side of things. And to kind of go along with that, look for classes that have practical applications as well as the kind of core knowledge classes. I think if you can, in the course catalogs, if there's things that are actually applications of engineering, those will help you kind of also get an idea of what your day-to-day job will look like as well. So see if they have those. And at the university I was at, they were often like special topics courses. They weren't kind of part of the core curriculum. So be on the lookout for those applications courses.
I'd like to add that maybe I wish I'd have taken some more. I did take one public speaking class, but it's something I didn't realize early on that there would be so much public speaking involved in civil engineering, whether you're presenting to smaller client groups or bodies of government, usually planning commissions and city councils and that kind of thing.
I guess for me, from an analytical standpoint, I would focus more on concepts rather than whether or not I can do 2 + 2. That's a when you get to the higher levels, you don't really focus on whether or not you can do the calculations. But once you get to those really, really like differential equations or mechanics of materials or systems, no one's testing you on whether or not you can punch numbers into a calculator, because we all have calculators. But rather they're really trying to make you focus on if you understand the concepts. And if you can understand the concept, then you can kind of navigate your way to the answer. But if you don't understand the concept, it really doesn't work. And from a macro standpoint, I would say, like Ben and Nan were saying, a lot of internships, but I would just recommend to everybody, make mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes. Don't try and be perfect while you're in school and, oh, I got to do this and do that, and just make mistakes, and it's okay. You'll continue to make mistakes. I guess I regret I didn't make enough mistakes. I mean, not huge mistakes, not like rob a bank or anything like that. Not that kind of mistake, but more like, oh, I wish I would have went out and tried this, or I wish I would have went out and spent extra time with Dr. Rulison and, maybe picked his brain more about this concept that I really didn't understand, or something like that.
Can I actually jump in and add one other thing that I just thought of? So one thing that was, maybe it shouldn't have been as shocking as it was to me when I got into some of my engineering courses, and then definitely into my job, was when you're an engineer, you never have all the information. So when, I feel like as an undergrad, you always have every piece of information you need to solve the problem. As an engineer, you never do. You're always having to make assumptions and judgments. And that was so scary for me when I first started having to make these decisions without feeling entirely confident that I knew all the pieces.
Because you just make the decision based on what information you have at that very time. Mm-hmm. And it's okay, like 20 years from now, you can be like, oh, I didn't know that at that time. So that's pretty good. And
Vernon, to tie into what you were talking about with concepts, that's where it's really useful when you understand concepts, because you can kind of decide, oh, well, maybe this piece of information isn't as important if I don't know it, but that other piece is critical. Right. And so yeah, when you were talking about concepts, that really, really hit home for me.
And I really like to emphasize that I say a lot of times the only bad question is the one that goes unasked. And I find myself constantly encouraging the younger engineers, ask questions. It's okay not to know. It's not okay to continue not knowing because because of your pride or something. We're a team, and ask questions and listen to your teammates.
That's great. Some great advice. Thank you, all of you, for that. We only have a few minutes left, but we do have a couple more last minute questions that I would like to ask. So this question came from Ms. Aaron in the chat. It says, is there one project in particular that you are most proud of, or maybe a project that you learned from the most? And whoever wants to, I guess, jump on that first.
I'll jump on that one. About 18 months after Katrina, my company was hired to complete 2 sets of temporary stormwater pumps in New Orleans. And it was delivered through the Army Corps of Engineers as a design build. And it was really, really fascinating. The culture of that project was just one of my favorites. It seemed like everybody just had a tremendous amount of respect. It was one of the most difficult jobs that I've ever been a part of. Long hours, a lot of travel. heat and humidity, but that has to be right up there. And you know, a strong sense of helping a community that really needed help at that time.
For me, it was my central prison project. This particular project, I spent 8 years of my career on. It was a multi-phase project. There was 4 different phases of it, state of North Carolina, and it was by far the most challenging project. And it was the most challenging project because it started design in 1996. I was still in high school when it started design. So something I should have never, a project I should have never had any part in, basically. It went on the shelf due to fund issues and it came back. And when it came back, most of the people at our firm that had worked on it were gone. The ones that were left didn't want anything to do with it. It was always a problem project. And it got dumped on me and my boss at the time. And it was the project from hell in every sense of it. What was on paper, the state of North Carolina said, bid it. We said it doesn't meet code. They said, we'll fix it in construction. So anybody that works in construction can imagine the nightmare of them trying to build while you're trying to fix the design and not able to find things, you don't know what's wrong. This is multiple buildings. So we had challenge after challenge. We had a difficult owner rep. I mean, it was the project that anything that could go wrong went wrong. It was the project we were being asked to do unrealistic things. The only time I've been asked to put a drain pan in an elevator, let's just say that didn't actually happen for a plethora of reasons. But it was a project that in those 8 years, I learned so much. Not only did I learn so much technical knowledge, not only did I learn from other mistakes, I grew as a person. I became a stronger team player. I spent 3 months straight, 5 days a week on the job site kind of project. It was something that, because it was such a problem project, everybody ran from it, including my boss. So it was something that I got stuck with, even as not that senior of an engineer. I was kind of a peon when I started on that thing. And by the end, I was in charge of it. And people were happy to work with me. People were proud to work with me. And it grew. And there's a lot of things I can say terrible about that project because it was so frustrating and it was so difficult, but at the same time, it made me such a better engineer. So sometimes those projects that are terrible and difficult turn out to be one of the best things for you. And that was that project for me. Included in that project, and one of the reasons it was so difficult was we did a hospital for a prison. There is not a hospital prison code exactly. So you're trying to deal with a building that you have to bring it up to code, but you don't have a code to bring it up to. You're trying to make stuff healthcare compliant, while at the same time not letting inmates have access to stuff. And that's extremely difficult. And it put us in a position where we had to make really tough decisions in some cases of what's more important, the healthcare code safety things or inmates and what they can do, what's more detrimental. And those are tough choices, and you're not making them alone ever. The medical gas valves was one of the big ones, and you're making that as a team and in a group. And that's where that working as a team comes into play. You're working with a bunch of different trades. You're all sitting down, you're all trying to solve a problem together, and you're all laying your ideas out. And that for me is the project that I am the most proud of and got the most out of.
The project that I'm most proud of didn't have quite so many issues, but I actually had the privilege to be the structural project engineer for the Cousin Center building on Oglethorpe's campus. So just for my career to kind of come full circle, I spent all my days in Goslin. It was a wonderful, wonderful building. But it was so rewarding to be able to come back and give back to Oglethorpe and just help create this. It's a beautiful building that Cooper Carey was the architect, and they designed just a beautiful building, and it was a lot of fun to work with. Obviously, just hit close to home, and I really enjoyed working on that project.
That's my favorite building, by the way.
Mine too.
Anyone else wanted to add any last minute input or anything like that?
I'll share a little bit about one of my favorite projects. Well, I don't know if favorite's the right word, maybe most impactful projects for me as a professional. Probably 2 or 3 years into my career, my boss asked me to lead a project for a small electric utility in North Georgia where they were replacing a particular piece of outdated equipment across all of their substations. And he kind of forced me to step up and own all of the different aspects of the project, from designing the interface to programming the computers to then figuring out how to multiply it to 55 different pieces of equipment, to doing the demolition and installation and testing, as well as kind of owning the project management side of things. So that really forced me to get out of my comfort zone of just doing a small piece of a project with a lot of direction from others, to really owning the entire project process. So that was something that made a big impact, you know, in terms of my confidence and abilities as an engineer.
All of our projects are secret, so I can tell you in about 50 years maybe, but
We can't quite hear you, Mr. Vernon. I don't know if your volume's low.
can you hear me now? I was gonna say all of our projects are secret, so I can tell you in about 50 years if that helps. But I think if anybody needs anything, you know, they can call me or they can text me whatever they want or email me. And I know this hour or whatever time that we have is probably not enough for questions, but I'm sure, Joi, you can give them our information.
Yeah, the hour goes by so fast. So thank you so much, everyone, for being a part of it. And thank you so much, Joi. You did an amazing job moderating. Such great questions. And, you know, students, if you have some additional questions going on, or if a student is watching this after the fact and you have some questions, feel free to send them my way. I'm Erin Sherrill at esherrill@oglethorpe.edu, and I can forward them on to our panelists, help you get connected to panelists, and make sure that you get your questions answered. John made a very good point. The worst question is those that go unasked. So thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Joi. And I hope you have a wonderful evening.